If you own an AR-15, you need to pay attention right now, because what just happened at the Supreme Court could shape what you can buy, keep, transport, or even trust for years to come. Before we go any further, quick question. Are you subscribed yet? If not, hit that button right now, because gun laws do not change slowly anymore. They move fast, they get messy, and if you miss one major update, you can end up relying on bad information at the worst possible time. Here's what just happened. On June 30, 2026, the U.S. Supreme Court agreed to hear two major cases about bans on AR-15 style rifles and similar firearms. One case comes out of Cook County, Illinois, the other comes out of Connecticut. The case names matter, so remember them. Viramontes v. Cook County and Grant v. Higgins, and this is a big deal. Why? Because the Supreme Court does not take many gun cases. When it does, it usually means one thing. The justices believe the issue is important enough, messy enough, or divided enough in the lower courts that they need to step in and give one answer for the whole country. That does not mean our 15 bans are dead today. It does not mean every ban just vanished overnight, and it does not mean you can ignore your state law because the Supreme Court is on it. That right there is the first big warning in this video. Most gun owners hear, the Supreme Court took the case, and their brain jumps to, we won. Slow down. A case being accepted is not the same as a case being decided. The court has only agreed to hear the fight. That means arguments still have to happen. Briefs still have to be filed. The justices still have to question both sides, and then they still have to issue an opinion. That ruling could come much later in the term. So if you live in a state or city that already restricts AR-15 style rifles, those rules may still be in force right now. That is the part nobody should get wrong. Now let me explain why this matters so much to you. For the last few years, gun cases have been running through federal courts like crazy. Some courts have upheld bans, some judges have shown serious doubt, and now the split is getting harder to ignore. Just over a week after the Supreme Court took those two new cases, the Seventh Circuit upheld Illinois' assault weapons ban. Then, on July 17th, the Third Circuit struck down New Jersey's assault weapons ban and its magazine limits. That is a huge contrast. One federal appeals court said a ban can stand, another said a similar ban violates the Second Amendment. When you start seeing that kind of split, the pressure builds fast. Then another thing happened. In Virginia, a new sales ban affecting AR-15 style firearms was blocked and then paused while everyone waits to see what the Supreme Court does with the Illinois and Connecticut cases. So now you have three moving parts at once. You have states still enforcing bans, you have lower courts disagreeing, and you have the Supreme Court stepping in. That is why this is not just another gun headline. This is the kind of moment that can redraw the map. But here's the crazy part. Even when a case is this big, the biggest danger to gun owners is not always the final ruling. Sometimes the biggest danger is what people do while they wait. Here's a simple example. Let's say a guy in a restricted state sees one headline that says, Supreme Court to hear AR-15 ban case. He gets excited. He assumes that means the courts have basically decided AR-15s are protected. He goes online, starts ordering parts, talks big in group chats, and tells his friends that bans are over. But they are not over. Not yet. And if he acts like they are, he could make a very expensive mistake. That mistake might not happen during some dramatic SWAT raid. It might happen during a traffic stop. It might happen during a move to another state. It might happen when he posts something online that draws attention to a setup that is still restricted where he lives. It might happen when he tries to sell or transfer something that his local law still regulates. That is why smart gun owners do not live off headlines. They live off actual legal status. And right now, the actual legal status in many places has not changed. If you're finding this helpful, imagine what you'll learn in my next video about the exact mistakes gun owners make when they assume a court case already changed the law. Subscribe now so you do not miss that one. Because this stuff is where good people get burned by bad assumptions. Now let me break down what these cases are really about, in plain English. The fight is not just over one brand, one stock, or one scary name. The real question is much bigger. The court is going to look at whether AR-15 style rifles are protected by the Second Amendment, the same way other commonly owned firearms are protected, or whether states can still ban them by treating them as especially dangerous weapons. That sounds technical, but here is the simple version. One side says these rifles are owned by millions of law-abiding Americans, so they are clearly common arms and the government cannot just ban them. The other side says these rifles can still be singled out because of how lawmakers view their firepower, design, or public danger. And that fight matters because once the Supreme Court gives a clear answer, that answer will not stay wrapped inside Illinois or Connecticut. It could affect laws all across the country. Now here is where it gets interesting. The court has already dropped hints before. In an earlier case involving Maryland's ban, the justices did not take the case at that time. But there were signs that several justices thought the issue was coming back soon. And now it has. That tells me this is not random. The court knew this issue was not going away. So what should you be watching for? First, watch the exact question the court is trying to answer. Sometimes people focus on the headlines and miss the real legal question. The justices are not deciding whether guns are good or bad. They are deciding whether the government can ban this class of firearm under the Constitution. Second, watch whether the court talks more about common use or more about dangerous and unusual weapons. Those phrases matter. Common use basically means many law-abiding people own something for lawful reasons. Dangerous and unusual is the opposite idea. Courts have fought over where AR-15 style rifles fit. Third, watch what happens to related laws. Magazine limits often travel with rifle bans, and while the Supreme Court did not take a magazine case at the same time, it may still send strong signals that affect those laws too. Now, quick legal note. This is educational information, not legal advice. Always consult an attorney for your specific situation. I want to say that clearly because this is where viewers sometimes expect a magic sentence or one-size-fits-all answer. There is no magic sentence here. If you are in a state with a ban, your next move should be based on your current local law, not on your favorite headline and not on what somebody screamed into a phone camera. Here's what most people get wrong. They think the only question is, will the ban survive? That is not the only question. The better question is, what do I do between now and the ruling? That is the adult question, that is the useful question, and the answer starts with discipline. Do not buy based on rumors. Do not transfer based on social media posts. Do not travel with a setup you assume became legal because a case is on the docket. Do not argue with law enforcement using half-remembered court talk, and do not assume your state, your county, and your city all follow the same rules. That last one catches people all the time. Here's a hypothetical example to explain this. Imagine you live in one state, but you work in another, or you live in a state with fewer restrictions and travel into a place with far tighter rules. You think I'm fine because the Supreme Court is reviewing the issue anyway. That thought can get you in trouble fast if the law where you are standing has not changed yet. The courtroom battle and the street level reality are often on two different timelines. The courts may be debating the future, while police, prosecutors, and state agencies are still enforcing the present. That is why this moment matters so much. Not because you should panic, but because you should stay sharp. Hey, real talk. A huge chunk of people watching right now are not subscribed. Don't be part of that group. Join the gun owners who follow this channel for straight updates without the fake drama, because when a case this big moves, I'll break down what changed, what didn't, and what you actually need to do next. Now let's talk about what could happen next. There are really three broad possibilities. 1. The Supreme Court could rule that bans on AR-15 style rifles violate the Second Amendment. If that happens, states with similar bans could face serious legal trouble very quickly. 2. The court could uphold the bans and say states still have room to restrict these rifles. If that happens, the map may stay tight, and some lawmakers may feel even bolder. 3. And this is the part many people ignore, the court could issue a narrow ruling. It could focus on how one lower court handled the issue. It could send a case back down. It could answer less than the internet hopes for. That third option matters because people online always act like every Supreme Court gun case ends with fireworks and total clarity. Sometimes it does not. Sometimes it clears one issue and leaves 5 more arguments behind. So do not build your future plan around a fantasy version of the ruling. Build it around what you can control. Here are the first things I would tell any AR-15 owner to do right now. Know your current state and local law as it exists today. Keep your rifle configured legally where you live. Be careful with parts, transfers, and transport. Save records that show what you own and when you acquired it, if that matters under your local rules. And if you live in a restricted state, talk to a real attorney before making any move based on this case. That is not fear. That is just smart. Because when a major ruling finally drops, the people who handle it best are usually the people who stayed boring, careful, and disciplined while everyone else was yelling online. Let me give you one more real-world scenario. Imagine the court eventually rules in favor of gun owners. A lot of people will celebrate, and I get that. But even then, changes may not happen instantly in every corner of the country. Some states may resist. New court orders may have to be entered. Old cases may have to be reopened. Agencies may need guidance. Confusion may last 4 weeks or months. So even a win would not mean you stop paying attention. That is why the title of this video matters so much. If you own an AR-15, you really do need to See what just happened, because the biggest story is not just that the court took the case. The biggest story is that the legal fight has entered a new phase. The stakes are higher now, the split between courts is sharper now, and the chances of a national answer just went way up. But wait, there's something even more important. This moment is also a test of how responsible gun owners respond to legal uncertainty. Anybody can get excited, anybody can post a meme, anybody can shout, "It's over," but a responsible owner does something else. He slows down, he checks the real status of the law, he separates today's facts from tomorrow's possibilities, and he does not gamble his freedom on a headline. That is the move, not panic, not chest thumping, not blind trust, discipline, because if the court rules your way later, great, you will be ready, and if it does not, you'll still be glad you did not make a reckless choice while the country was waiting for an answer. Laws change fast, really fast. So subscribe now, because the next big update in these AR-15 cases could completely change what owners in restricted states need to do, and you do not want to find out after the fact when the risk is already sitting on your doorstep. So let's land this. The Supreme Court has agreed to hear to major cases on bans covering AR-15 style rifles. Lower courts are already split. Some state bans remain active right now, and nothing about this moment gives you permission to ignore the law where you live today. The smart takeaway is simple. Stay calm, stay current, and do not confuse a case being heard with a case being won. If you want clear updates without the nonsense, subscribe and stay with me, because when the next move happens in these cases, you need the real version, not the internet version. And one last thing. This video is for education only. It is not personal legal advice. If your rifle, your state, or your situation raises a real question, talk to a qualified attorney before you act.